Hello, my name is Audrey Marriage, and today I'm going to be talking about human trafficking in the United States and how education on human trafficking can save lives. So, human trafficking is a form of modern-day slavery in which individuals are exploited through manual sexual labor. These individuals are seen as an object and property in which they are used as profit and beneficial use to their abusers, and they can be bought and sold. They are abused, forced, and coerced into obeying their traffickers' orders. The prevalence of human trafficking has greatly increased due to the fact that people are non-expendable, in which they can be bought and sold multiple times rather than just one time. And human trafficking has become the second largest criminal industry in the world, surpassing the business of illegal firearms, according to the peer-reviewed article written by Ronnie and Villano. Why victims cannot escape is because the fear that has been instilled in them through threats, violence, sexual acts, force, beatings, depriving them of survival needs like food and water. These victims are physically, mentally, and emotionally abused in order for their abusers to gain control over them. And submission is usually the only way of survival for these victims. And this process occurs in two stages, in which they call the initiation stage, which is when all the initial beatings and forced sexual acts and rapes all begin. The second stage is known as the indoctrination stage, in which once victims have submitted to their abuser, now it's just more of gaining more of that bond relationship, just to gain the ultimate power and control over these victims, in which they have now become brainwashed into thinking that they deserve this treatment or that this is the normal way of life. And in this indoctrination stage, the abuser uses his authoritarian status to create his own rules and routines that they must follow, and this usually occurs once a group of victims have been accumulated under his or her power. Their abusers then choose random favorites and switch it up randomly in order to have that one-on-one bond, but also use that victim over the other individual victims and make sure that they're all abiding by the rules and orders, and help him also implement those. Why is human trafficking relevant to healthcare? Healthcare providers are actually not well educated on human trafficking, and therefore this results in being not able to identify these victims in time. Due to not having insurance and being under strict control, these victims do not often go to doctor offices, regular appointments, anything like that. Most of the time, the only reason they go to the emergency room is when they desperately need medical care. So usually we'll find them in the emergency room. The United States Department of State stated that once trapped in the human trafficking world, a person's life expectancy is approximately 7 years. So this goes to show how important it is that we identify these victims early on, or that one chance that they may have, because they may not ever come into our hands again. The common causes of death of human trafficked victims are from attacks, abuse, sexually transmitted infections, substance overdose, suicide, and malnutrition. According to a peer-reviewed article called What Healthcare Providers Should Know About Human Sex Trafficking, is approximately 87% of trafficked individuals were seen by a healthcare provider during the time they were under the control of their traffickers. So this goes to show how many are seen in healthcare and that go undetected. Signs and red flags of human trafficked victims include social cues that are abnormal, such as avoiding eye contact, being reserved, quiet, or uncomfortable, talking about maybe where he or she has acquired a certain injury. They may also be hesitant when answering any questions or even personal questions. These are the noticeable signs of victims that are usually isolated from society. They don't really have that social encounter with other people, but there are some victims who have a more social life because their traffickers allow them to have a little more leeway, so they may not present such awkward social cues. But we still have to be able to identify these victims, and so we can often look for malnutrition or dehydration due to the trafficker having complete control over their food rations, poor personal hygiene due to the lack of access to showers or toothbrushes. They may have physical markings such as bruises, cuts, broken bones, cigarette burns, and they can also have bleeding of the genital or anal area from physical and sexual abuse. You can also look for signs and markings, maybe the individual trying to commit suicide, because often these victims see that this is their only way out. The lower back is also a common injury site because this area can be hidden easily by clothing, so it's good to assess the whole body. Also look for markings not associated with injury or abuse, because some traffickers use markings of ownership of their victims and they can tattoo them to brand them as their own. As the healthcare provider, the roles that we should play in these people's lives are to provide them comfort and emotional and mental support, as well as caring for the underlying physical health issues. Always reassure that they are safe and make them feel secure. We also want to gain their trust so that they feel comfortable opening up to us about their situation. People may need to seek counseling or have a therapist or a psychologist for further mental emotional support, so we want to make sure that that's available to them as well. And also avoid re-traumatizing the individual, so we must be aware of their mental and emotional status of the current situation that they're in. What to do next? So when you're suspecting that there is a victim of human trafficking, or if we have already confirmed that they are a victim of sexual trafficking, it's important to follow the protocols set in place by the facility that you work for, if they have any set in place. Some places may have a forensic nurse on staff that will further assess the patient and start the investigation process. If the facility does not have any set protocols in place, you must report the situation to the law enforcement and the FBI to allow them to then further investigate the situation. And from there, forensic nurses are used in these situations to gather information and evidence of human trafficking, as well as care for the patient and assess their health and make sure that they're okay, in order to save the individual as well as others involved. And forensic nurses, they always must do screenings done in private to ensure that the victims are safe, as well as not arousing suspicion in the trafficker, because we always want to make sure that they are safe. And how education can help these victims is education of human trafficking will allow healthcare providers to be more aware of the presenting signs of human trafficking in order to suspect and identify victims. Because we lack this education, we aren't able to help them, and they walk into our offices all the time going unnoticed. And it's also important to know what to do once you have come in contact with a suspected victim, or once you have identified a victim of human trafficking. It's important to know what protocols to follow in which we can help save them. And there's my resources.